Thanks for jumping on, Andrew and Alex. Andrew, I know you're the CISO at Socket, and Alex, you're the CPO at Corridor, past CISO at Facebook also. Alex, I've had you on the pod before. Andrew, this is your first appearance. Welcome. Wanted to get us all together, like very, impromptu. This was not planned. A lot's going on right now in terms of talking about Fable, the model from Anthropic that they published and then quickly had to shut down because the government ordered them to do so out of what it looks like fear of the repercussions of that. Would love to hear your perspectives on why the government shut that down, why you published an open letter and both signed it saying, hey, we need to get these models back online. Tell us what's happening and your thoughts on it.
So happy to start. So first, congratulations, Andrew, on the new role at Socket, and I believe this is your first podcast as CISO of Socket.
That's right, Alex. Thanks. I'm really excited to be here and be at Socket, and excited to have my inaugural podcast with both of you.
And hopefully it goes well and it's not your last. So a shout out to the executives and board members of Socket, socket.dev. What's going on with Fable? Over the weekend, we wrote and pulled together an open letter on this. You can go to freefable.org. A little bit of a failure by the brand management team at Anthropic. That domain I was able to grab on Cloudflare for $8 or whatever. Why did we do this? Basically what happened, so a quick recap is there was research that was being done by, I'll just say it because everybody knows, by Amazon, which is not unsurprising. Amazon is a partner of Anthropic's, hosts Anthropic's models, and I expect that this research was being done as part of kind of the shared responsibility model that Amazon has here, where they are responsible for monitoring and securing Anthropic's models in some cases, including in the classified setting, right? Famously, there are controversies around Anthropic providing their models to the government. In the situations where Anthropic models are provided to the government, it is on Amazon hosting. So Amazon ended up having some concerns around the security protections that were in place to prevent Fable from being used to do some of the stuff that Mythos famously can. For those listeners who don't know, Fable is effectively a Mythos class model. It is a descendant of Mythos. Mythos is ripping its way through a number of code bases, finding lots of bugs. And the idea is Fable should be able to do all the good stuff Mythos can do, and hopefully very little of the evil things Mythos can do. Now, if you read Fable's model card, Anthropic does not say Fable cannot do any cybersecurity stuff, right? What they say is they effectively, and they go into a lot of detail, define different tiers of cybersecurity operations. And what they, to sum it up, what they basically say is we don't want Fable to be able to do complex cybersecurity work. We definitely don't want it to be able to do kind of end-to-end offensive operations, right? You should not be allowed to ask Fable, go build me an exploit kit and go use it to break in, right? But it does need to understand software security at some level because it can write code. And if you want it to write code, it has to be able to know what insecure code looks like so it doesn't make mistakes. And Amazon's researchers took advantage of this and took some known CVEs, some known vulnerabilities, as well as some artificially vulnerable code that they wrote, and asked Fable, hey, find the bugs right here, create a patch, and then using that patch, and did a bunch of different tricks to take the patch and undo the patch and stuff. But effectively, we're able to trick Fable into writing proof of concept of tests against that code. And that proof of concept code, you could argue, is an exploit. Now, there's a quibble effectively between Amazon and Anthropic of how bad this is. But what it comes down to is Anthropic verified that you could do the exact same thing with the exact same bugs on GPT 5.5, on Anthropic's other models, Opus, Sonnet, even in some cases Haiku, which is their little baby model. And you could do it on Kimi. What is Kimi? It is one of the Chinese open weight models. So if you can do these things on all of the other models that are available, there is no argument as to why you should shut down Fable if there is no uplift in capabilities. What you really worry about with Mythos is feeding Mythos the entire Linux kernel or all of Firefox is what people are doing legitimately, and then saying find a bunch of bugs, and then asking it build me a whole kill chain, which Amazon is not claiming they were able to do. They were able to have it find these specific bugs. But then the White House went, and specifically the Department of Commerce went and put export controls in place that gave Anthropic no choice but to pull Fable down completely for everybody on a Friday afternoon with apparently only minutes of warning, like an hour and a half of warning or something, or back and forth. And so what our open letter says is that, one, this is not supportable by any of the evidence that any of us have seen. Two, this is not how we are supposed to do regulation in the United States of America, right? If American prosperity has been based upon a regulatory environment that is fair, that is transparent, that is executed with due process, and that all of those things are missing here. There's nothing here that is based upon evidence, nothing here that is based upon science, and certainly there is no due process here when you have somebody basically making up the rules on a Friday afternoon and enforcing them with 90 minutes of warning. So that is effectively what the letter at freefable.org says, and what we call for is both the removal of the export restrictions, but then more importantly, for the administration to kind of give up on this vibes-based AI regulation and to have a process that is actually based upon science and evidence and that is transparent and predictable so that everybody can kind of figure out what are the rules that they have to follow.
Amazing. Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And I saw that Jack Cable, your CEO over there at Corridor, testified at Congress recently
Yes.
around the need for better infrastructure and understanding around hey, what does a defensive strategy look like for AI security and understanding models as well. Do you think that's an important part of the process here also is maybe these government officials making these decisions that need help being educated on what these models are actually capable of?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things he talked about was AI is coming no matter what you do. The letter had to reflect the fact that there's lots of disagreement. Over 100 people have signed it now. And so some people believe there should be regulation. Some people believe there's no regulation. Some people believe that Anthropic themselves have been way too restrictive. I personally kind of agree that. I mean, I think Anthropic, has somewhat created the situation through some of the things they've said, but also, they probably should have shared mythos a little bit more widely. Although this shows how risky that would have been for them, right, if they had done so. They are walking a fine line. The truth is the public Chinese models are only months behind the Opus series and GPT 5.5. If you look at the evaluations, and those are the models we know about. The People's Liberation Army and the Ministry of State Security undoubtedly have access to private models from ByteDance, DeepSeek, Moonlight, and the other Chinese labs that we do not know about. And so, they are laughing at us in Beijing right now. While the U.S. government is kneecapping one of the key U.S. labs, they are moving forward in China in developing these models, finding bugs, stockpiling those bugs, building exploit chains and kill chains that are AI powered. And so this is coming. We got to get ready for a future that is offense is powered by AI, and we need defense that's powered by AI, and create a situation where defenders cannot rely upon AI models being there. Niels Provost, a friend of mine, maybe of Andrew's as well, who built most of the security infrastructure at Google, incredibly brilliant guy, who also is my hero because he is retired from security and now builds Viking swords. You should check out his YouTube channel. Just like Andrew, he's got a great YouTube channel. But he wrote actually a good piece on this today, that if you can't rely upon an AI model being there because the White House might yank it at any moment, you're going to use open source models. Who writes those models? The Chinese, right? And so this is a huge strike, not just at Anthropic, but at the trustworthiness of the American AI industry. If the rest of the world is I cannot trust an American company because at any moment the White House might, on a Friday afternoon, create a Sev 1 for me because the models I built my SOC upon all of a sudden disappear.
And that's very much my experience. So these new models get released and organizations like the one I work at start looking at how to adopt them, right? What is this model capable of? What are the economics associated with it? How might we use it in our operations to write code or incorporate it into our products? And so we just begun that at the point that the model gets yanked away for what are largely arbitrary reasons, right? And so for my own use, right, for defending my organization. I wasn't looking to use Fable for any offensive capabilities, and by all accounts, like Fable is pretty nerfed from an offensive standpoint. There were tons of jokes last week about how people couldn't get it to do anything of any reasonable complexity, right? And apparently Amazon had to expend significant effort to get it to write exploits for already known CVEs, right? And so, we're in this situation where in a very arbitrary process, right? There was no due process, there was no notice, there's not really evidence here of the potential for significant public harm. We've really, disrupted our own organizations and hampered the trustworthiness of the American technology community in the world abroad.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember talking to you, Alex, at RSA around, hey, there's this coming bug apocalypse. Like Mythos had recently been released around that time, and people were really worried about like how good was this model and how exploitative it was in terms of like finding exploits in Linux that have been sitting around for like 23 years, and the need to build a defensive security posture to be prepared for when these things do get released was super imperative. I remember we talked about teams need to start building now. It's now like 3 months or whatever later. That time is here. Like, what does that bug apocalypse look like? I know some people I called Mythos like FUD ultimately, and a lot of people built their own security harnesses with Opus and other GPT models, and they were able to find significant vulnerabilities without Mythos. So I totally agree with what you were saying earlier around hey, these capabilities are already here with other models present today. Why was Fable the one that was pulled away?
Yeah, so I won't call Mythos FUD. It's better, right? There are scientific evals for this. It's better, but it's this much better, right? What's happening is Mythos had so much marketing behind it. And again, Anthropic did play this a little bit. I think if you ask them, they would maybe do things a little bit differently. But their marketing here has created the situation for them a little bit. And for this much improvement, they advertised it as this much, right? And what's happened is you have these people like Palo Alto Networks went out and said they spent $1 million in tokens or something and found 26 bugs. I bet that if you spent $1,000 or $5,000 in tokens on some other models, you'd have found 20 of those bugs, right? What's happening is people are taking code bases for which they've never used a modern AI-based code scanning tool that's properly tuned, that has the proper harnesses, that has the proper prompts, that feeds back on itself and learns and such. They've never done that. They've only used some old-ass source sync SAST product, and then they're shocked these things find a bunch of bugs. And the truth is they're really good. We build one, it works pretty well, right? It finds a bunch of bugs. And we run it against old code bases, and we find tons of stuff, and we're not using Mythos. So I think that's one of the things that's happening here is that you have organizations that are being provided Mythos under Project Glassring. When they're running it for the first time, they're finding a ton of things. But if they had used something else, they would have found 90% of that for a tiny fraction of the cost. As for fixing things, there is some evidence that ODAs are now being used by attackers way more than they were a little while ago. I don't do incident response all the time now, but there's a couple of the groups are showing that things that used to be through that you would have had to find a reuse password or something. People are now able to use ODA. They're able to use new exploits and such, and so the mixture of attack types is changing, and I think it is becoming clear to people we're not going to be able to patch our way out of this. So we are going to have to change what our defensive strategies look like. I also think, as we talked about before, things like the Linux kernel are just going to have to be rewritten, right? Kernels, daemons and services that are network facing, things like this are just going to be rewritten in memory safe languages. We're not going to be able to rewrite web browsers, like a JavaScript engine, if it's written in C and C++, is not going to be safe until it's rewritten in a memory safe language.
But I'd say it's not all about the vulnapocalypse, right? I think, obviously because of Mythos begat Fable, and so we're talking about ODA and exploit generation and whatnot. Something else that happened here is that security teams are builders, right? And security isn't just vulnerabilities and patching and whatnot, although all that stuff is very important. There's all this other really boring toil that happens inside of security programs around like asset inventory management and attack surface management and around on call and around monitoring and triage and answering your security at email alias, and like there's lots of unglamorous stuff that people are working very hard to leverage generative AI to reduce that toil, make our programs faster, make them more responsive, handle an increasing estate of things that we have to secure. And so when a defender like myself gets next generation capabilities like torn out of my hands, a week after, I start evaluating all the ways that this, will increase the efficacy of my program and increase the efficiency of my program, that's not helpful, right? That's not helping anyone. That's not keeping anyone safer, right? And so I don't see where the evidence is that Fable was so dangerous that we needed to go kneecap every organization, that's using Anthropic today in the United States and elsewhere.
Yeah. At a minimum, the rules have to be transparent and the actions have to be documented and transparent. Like if the NTSB grounds a Boeing plane, one, it's not a surprise to Boeing, right? Like the NTSB and the FAA have people who work in every single Boeing factory, that have people who sit in Boeing's headquarters and have a working relationship where they're constantly talking back and forth. They have volumes and volumes of regulation that are interpreted very deeply. And if there is a problem, it is because they have worked through everything and there is a long series of failures before they take some kind of drastic action that has huge economic impact, right? And if that something happens, if all the 737s in the country are grounded for some reason, you will know why, right? It will be documented deeply and there will be no surprise. Nobody knows why this model was yanked. There's been no justification other than a couple of tweets in which it is pretty clear that those tweets are not technically true, right? Like I have 120 something security experts who are now signed this letter up against some non-technical people from the White House who are saying what they are saying is false. So if they want to put out technical evidence, then they should do so. Otherwise, they should change this around, drop these export restrictions, or they should admit that this is not about any kind of actual technical risk and it's just vibes and culture war, right? Because that seems like a much more likely explanation at this point, which is not how we do business in the United States of America, right? That is actually not capitalism. That's closer to a Chinese model.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of precedent this creates and where we go from here and what sort of what regulation looks like going forward. And I imagine too, it's really important for organizations to have the latest technical capabilities from models. So I remember when we talked, Alex, at RSA, we said it was really important for every organization to have defensive agents that have the capability, security, and autonomy to take actions like shutting down VMs, rotating credentials, doing high-profile actions to actually play a role in defense, because humans will ultimately be too slow. So without these capabilities in hand, having them just yanked out of nowhere for reason and no sort of status update on when we can expect them to go back online, it hurts defenders tremendously.
It does. I mean, Andrew's right. I mean, thank God this thing was only out for a week, right? If it had been just a couple more weeks, then Fable would have been deeply integrated into people's systems. If they yanked Opus right now, you would see things breaking all over the place, especially on a Friday afternoon. Clearly, nobody who made this decision has ever carried a pager, right? Has never been in a Datadog or a pager duty rotation. Because if they had waited a couple more weeks, you would have had Sev 1s all over the place as people's systems failed. And like Neil said, it calls into question the reliability of the entire American AI industry. Can you rely upon any... It's like... The equivalent would have been if Anthropic found a cross-site scripting bug in Amazon.com, and so the White House said that AWS has to shut down US East 1, right? That's what happened here. It is completely disproportionate. Whether or not there's a reasonable complaint that a specific jailbreak worked or not, the response is completely disproportionate, and it really, really hurts the reliability of the American AI industry. It's also an insane thing to do right on the verge of what has been rumored to be Anthropic's S1, right? Like from a, considering how much of the U.S. economy is based upon these companies doing well, it's kind of a crazy, crazy thing to do.
I've heard some critics of the letter say that, well, Fable's not special, like you've admitted that, alternative models like from OpenAI and whatnot can do a lot of this work. And I think those people don't recognize the way companies actually function. And that just because there is an equivalent in the market doesn't mean that I can move to it on a Friday night. Just because, sure, you could probably put together a collection of models behind a harness that can do, maybe better than Fable work, right? There's lots of economic and operational reasons why we standardize our tooling, right? And so if I'm in an organization that has standardized on Anthropic for valid economic and operational and compliance-oriented reasons, to have those capabilities yanked at 5 p.m. on a Friday is deeply problematic for my operations, and frankly, puts us in a less safe posture.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have critics who have said things like, well, Anthropic themselves have been restricting access to Fable and Mythos. Well, Anthropic is I have some criticisms of those restrictions, but Anthropic is a private company. We have given the government a monopoly on violence, right? We give the government the power to arrest us and put us in jail. We give the government all of these capabilities. And so as a result, we have a constitution that is supposed to bind the government, and they are only supposed to act when they have specific enumerated powers that are, the executive branch is supposed to only do things that are powers that are given to them by Congress. The executive does not seem to actually have this power. There's nowhere in IEPA, which is what they cited, that actually gives them the power to do this. There's an executive order that should not have this kind of capability and also does not lay out a rule that was violated by Anthropic, right? In the United States of America, there's supposed to be a written law that you violate before an action is taken like this. There's no actual written law that was violated by Anthropic, right? From top to bottom, this was not a democratic act. There was no due process here. This is not something that should be considered acceptable. And it is shocking to me that people are just kind of like okay with it, including a bunch of people who kind of built their whole political personas on the idea that the Biden administration was overly tough against tech. And now we have one of the most important technology companies in the United States facing a completely invented regulation on a Friday evening where their most important product is yanked for no apparent or justified reason. And those people are silent or they're making jokes about it online. And so I think that's really unacceptable, if not, and obviously hypocritical. And it's a really, really dangerous precedent that we're going to let political appointees make these decisions with no basis in law, just based upon the vibes. It's really not a good thing for American prosperity.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm wondering, what's Amazon's stance on this? Because if this is so important to tech in our industry, shouldn't everyone just band together and say, hey, this could have happened to our model too. This race just got published. We should sign the letter also. Are they going to sign the letter? Have they?
I can't speak for Amazon. It seems really unlikely to me that this is the outcome they wanted, right? I think they have a very valid reason to be doing this testing. I think perhaps there is a back and forth between them on, hey, let's fix these classifiers that got turned and utilized for a political purpose that they never intended, is my guess.
Trust and safety is a really important function, right? Alex brought up Amazon's shared responsibility model earlier. I think that's a really great model to think about in terms of how we secure the internet. And I don't think any signer of the letter, would want to see, completely unfettered model releases from the foundation model laboratories, right? We all recognize the need to control this technology in ways for the public good. But they need to be based in science, right? And there needs to be due process. There needs to be law involved, and not arbitrary and capricious decisions made on a Friday at 5 p.m.
Sure. For teams that had Fable and were relying on it, what do you suggest they do now, and how do teams prepare for a potential future where this could potentially happen again now that this precedent has been set?
You need an LLM router that is set up with multiple providers across different providers, not just multiple models, but you need to be load balanced across multiple providers. I mean, that's always, I think, been a good reliability, for other non-political reasons. But it's unfortunate that now politics is a potential reliability and business continuity problem for AI.
Yeah, and, as a defender and as an operator, you say that, Alex, and it's the right answer, right? It's also incredibly difficult, right?
Yes.
Because for all the functional security and compliance reasons, okay, now I need to go negotiate enterprise agreements with multiple foundation model companies to get enterprise tier pricing, which is going to unlock single sign-on and all the other security and observability features that I need in order to safely operate on them, zero data retention, yeah. Then I'm looking at, seat licenses and different, economics for each model company. And it's, there are definitely organizations that have the resources to do that. And in my organization, we do work with all of the foundation lab companies and use all of the models. You're going to put a bunch of people below the security poverty line, though. A lot of organizations are not going to be able to use a model router. They're not going to be able to safely, economically, efficiently route requests to whichever foundation. And not to mention just the technical limitations of doing that, because you need to test on every model is different, right? And so what you've built on top of Fable is not necessarily going to translate cleanly to GPT 5.5. And it's an onerous burden that I don't feel comfortable saying that's just the way it is, right? You want to play, your budget needs to accommodate an economic relationship with every foundation lab, and you need to insert this new technical dependency in the form of a model router.
Or it's possible people are going to have self-host open source as their backup.
Yeah, once the models reach that level of capability, it'll be interesting to see what this world looks like, 9, 12, 18 months from now. Because right now, running models offline, you're really looking more at like Sonnet-like capabilities and getting up into Opus. But obviously, that's going to continue to improve apace. And so maybe we do see people shifting onto self-hosting open weight models.
And then is there any timeline for when Fable comes back online? No one has any idea. Sounds like no one knows. Up to the government.
I mean, the problem is this doesn't seem to be based upon anything real. So it's I mean, Anthropic is certainly making small changes. So that might give the administration cover to back down and to claim victory, right? They always have to claim victory, right? They can never lose. They always have to win. It's always win-win-win with them. So we'll see. Yeah. Who knows?
In the meantime, the call to action is go sign the letter.
I mean, you can go to freefable.org. You can submit to sign the letter. We are filtering the names a little bit. Yeah, I mean, more important than that, I think, is I think especially if you live in a swing state, is you can also call your congressman and you can say that what you'd like to see is reasonable regulations that actually come from Congress, right? Like until we have something written from Congress, all of this will be, it has been years, and there was discussion of the Biden administration and now under the Trump administration of Congress taking action, and instead it's the executive branch just making stuff up on the fly. And until we have something that is, we've had hearing after hearing after hearing, and nothing has actually been written by Congress. Until that happens, it will still be vibes-based AI regulation.
Yeah, what a potentially pivotal moment, and not just tech, but just like history and just in general. So, what a precedent.
Yeah, we'll have to explain this to Mythos' great-grandchildren of what happened. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Well, amazing. Thank you both for coming on today and taking time out of your day to cover this really interesting emerging topic here, and we'll continue to follow it. But yeah, thank you so much, Alex. Thank you, Andrew. Any closing words from either of you before we go?
Thank you for having us. It was a great first podcast for me of my tenure, and stay safe out there, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.